Okay, welcome back. In this video, I want us to talk about transport. Transport means the means you use to get around, how you move around. So the question we have here is, how do you get around your town? How do you get around your hometown? So when talking about getting around, we use the words go by. And this is normally used when we are talking about general means of moving around. It can be public or private. So we have some statements down here. And you can see the first one here. He goes to school by bus. He goes to school by bus. That means that every time he goes to school, he uses the bus. He goes to school by bus. So if that is like you are asked, how does he go to school? Then you say he goes to school by bus. The next statement here says that I went home by bike. I went home by bike. The word went, of course, is the past tense of the word go. So maybe I'm talking about yesterday or last week or any other day in the past. I'm saying I went home by bike, sorry. So it means that I used the bike to go home. That is the means by which I went home. Then, does he go to work by train? Does he go to work by train? So that is a question whether this person goes to work by train or maybe uses another means of transport. So does he go to work by train? Then this one says that Ken goes to work by taxi. Ken goes to work by taxi. So every time Ken goes to work, he uses a taxi to do so. Then we have this last statement, let's go by foot. Let's go by foot. Going by foot means walking. So this person who is saying, let's go by foot, is actually saying, let's walk. Maybe it's about going home. So this person is saying, let's walk home. So let's go by foot. Now, when talking about public transport, we can use the verbs take or use. We can use the words take or use. So like the sentences we have here, first of all, we have this question here, which says, how do you go to work? How do you go to work? Then the statements here, you can use any of these statements. I use the bus or I use buses. You can use the statement I use the bus if you are talking about a specific bus. There's a specific bus you are talking about, and maybe the person you are telling also knows that bus. Then you can say I use the bus. Otherwise, if you use random buses, different buses, like maybe yesterday you used a different bus, today a different bus, and tomorrow you are likely to use a different bus, then it is good for you to say, I use buses. I use buses. That means I use different buses to go to work. Then the other statement here says that I use buses. Okay, you can say I use buses or I take buses. You can also use the word take. Use and take, when you are talking about moving around, they mean the same thing. I use buses or I take buses. They both mean the same thing. Then this one here, I use a taxi or I take a taxi. I use a taxi or I take a taxi. So how do you go to work? I say I use a taxi or I take a taxi. You can also tell a person, let's use a taxi or let's take a taxi. Let's take a taxi or let's use a taxi. That means the same thing. Now, if you are talking about getting around by bicycle, car, or even on foot, you can use the words, cycle, drive, and walk. So look at these statements down here. How do you go to work? Then you can use any of these words depending on what means you use. I cycle to work, I cycle to school. That means I use a bike or a bicycle. You can also say I drive or I walk. So I drive, you can say I drive to work, I drive to school or anywhere, or you can say I walk to school or I walk to work, right? So thank you for watching and see you in my next video.